How could you do this to me? You're not being a good kid. I'm trying to be a good parent. Why do you always diss me? Why do you always yell at me? Why are you so rude to me? Put that all down, get it all out of your system. Okay, let me start. My talk is entitled, How Writing Can Help You Improve Your Mental Health and Communication with Your Alienated Child. If you're new here, you should check out on this site the Erasing Families documentary directed by Gingergentile. If you want more help with your family conflicts, alienated children, go to reversingparentalalienation.com/roadmap. And you can join the roadmap where you can learn to reunite and attract your kids back. Who am I? I'm a father of 9. In 2017, I had a high conflict divorce with all its associated chaos, which I'm sure you're all familiar with. And I now have a great relationship with 4 of the children and working on the other relationships as well. And the tools I'm going to give you aren't just for divorce. You can use these in all sorts of other instances. I've gone through bankruptcies. I lost my home in a flood. I've gone through other trauma, and these techniques work well in other situations as well. And so I'll also explain a little bit about some of the other things that I do. I'm a university professor at the University of Waterloo in electrical and computer engineering as my day job. And as a researcher, I do a lot of writing. I write a lot of research papers. And so that's why I'm very passionate about writing. And when you write research papers, you may have to summarize 2 years of research into 10 pages. And so I've learned very quickly that you should write everything down, make it clear, and then edit down. And that's actually kind of the process that we're going to use here. We're going to get you to write everything down, and then we're going to trim things down using the techniques that you can find in the Revive program through the roadmap at reversingparentalalienation.com. So I'm very passionate about this whole idea of writing to help ease mental wellness issues. Now, when I went through my high conflict divorce, I went to counseling right away. I'm a big believer in counseling. And my awesome counselor encouraged me to always write when I wanted to vent, but, and if you're taking notes, put this in capitals, do not send. Okay? So I wrote a lot. I actually ended up writing a book about my experiences. But you don't always have to send it. So I have this book sitting there that I wrote that I initially wanted to publish, but now it's just part of my healing process. And I'll explain how that works, and why it works. So why do I do this? Why am I so passionate about, when you're going through a difficult time, writing? Okay, now here's the science, where the science kicks in. Science tells us that when you write, you're using a different part of your brain than the fight, flight, freeze, and fawn part of your brain. So way back in the day, when we were trying to run away from the saber-toothed tigers, right? Your brain evolved to have this fight, freeze, and fawn. They had to make this a tongue twister, of course, for me. And when you go into this mode of fight, flight, freeze, and fawn, you basically cannot reason. You can't get the reasoning part of your brain to work properly. Okay? So, and then it's because when you see a bear or you see a saber-toothed tiger, you've got to get out of there fast. So your brain kind of goes into overload, and you can't do the high-level cognitive reasoning that you normally would want to do. Okay, so when you're going through a situation where you're in a high-conflict divorce and your emotions are triggered, you're often in this fight, flight, freeze, and fawn modality. Okay, so what happens when you write? In order for you to write, your brain has to switch from this highly anxious, gotta run away stage to something that's more cognitive. Your writing actually flips your brain from being in that flight, fight, and freeze mode back into a modality that you can actually think clearly. So physiologically, your brain can't work in both modes. If you are in that difficult, anxious, nervous, highly emotional state, by writing, you can switch your brain back into a better state. Writing takes this brain function, and you start to be able to really think clearly. And that's why a lot of counselors say you should journal, because journaling, when you write down at the end of the day everything that you've done, has that same purpose. Gets you out of that really highly emotional state. So how does this relate to what you're going through? Well, probably don't need to explain this to you, but you have to do a lot of correspondence when you're going through a high conflict divorce, when you have alienated children, when you have lawyers and exes, blah, 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 blah. So what we want to do is to give you a tool to help you correspond with, in this particular case, we're talking about your alienated children, okay? So let's suppose you need to send something to your kids. And if you're like most parents, they probably triggered you, they probably, bugged you in some way. And when you first want to react, that first email that you want to send, or that message or the text message, probably is not a good one to send, okay? However, one of the things I do want to encourage you to do is to pour it out. Get it out. So you write down everything and don't have a filter. So you start off by just putting everything down. How could you do this to me? You're not being a good kid. I'm trying to be a good parent. Why do you always diss me? Why do you always yell at me? Why are you so rude to me? Put that all down. Get it all out of your system. Get your brain switching from the flight, fright, freeze, and fawn mode back into that logical mode where you're writing, you're thinking logically. Your emotions are going to spill out on the page and they'll dissipate, right? You'll start to write and you'll have this email that you do not send. Okay. Then what do you do with this? Then what you're going to do is you're going to apply something called the Biff technique. What is Biff? Biff is brief, informative, firm, and friendly. Okay? So brief means you take your message that you just basically put on paper to release your emotions, and you make it very brief. 4 lines, 5 lines, that's it. You make it very informative, stick to the facts. Firm, you establish boundaries. If you want the child to be at a certain time for pickup, you just say, can you be there at 5 o'clock? I will be coming to pick you up. You are friendly. And sometimes you don't want to be friendly, but do put something in there that has that friendly tone, right? Now, once you write it down, so there's the Biff, you can memorize that acronym, but there's the 3 A's, and they're all no's. So no advising, no admonishing, and no apologies. So don't try to give advice to your child. Don't admonish them. Say, you're such a terrible child for treating me this way. And don't apologize in this email. Now, that sounds a little weird, but when you apologize, if there's high emotions on the other side, or they may have maybe even a personality disorder, they will often interpret an apology as your admission of fault. So you can write this without apologizing. That can come at some other point, but in this Biff response, focus on that, okay? So again, brief, informative, firm, friendly, no admonishment, no advice, and no apologies. And when you do this, you can shorten your response, and it will be a much better thing to send to your children. Very, very incredibly strong tool. I use it actually not just in communications in my divorce. I actually use it in my workplace, with my students, with my colleagues, and it's very, very effective. Now, once you do this, the other thing you got to remember, do you need to send it? So you should always think one more time, do I really need to send this? And if you're struggling, because sometimes when you put down and you're venting and you're putting all these things down, there's 20 million things that you're trying to say, okay? So take a few minutes, look at it, and think, what is my goal? And just have one goal in your Biff response. If you have more than one goal in your Biff response, it will not be brief, okay? So if you're having trouble shortening it, it could be that you've gone through and you've got too many goals. You're trying to get too much information across. So this is just a very short little video to help you in your interaction with your child, okay? So do that venting, put everything down on paper, unfiltered, to get your emotions out. Then use the Biff with the no 3 A's to shorten everything down, okay? And then decide, do I want to send? Yes or no? And do I have too many goals in there? Just one goal per email. Okay, thanks very much, everyone.